The grand hall of the Willowmere Manor glowed under cascades of golden light, chandeliers dripping with crystals that refracted rainbows across the polished oak floors. The air carried the scent of roses and vintage wine, mingling with the hum of laughter and clinking glasses. The wedding of the year in the coastal town of Maris Cove was a spectacle, opulent, unforgettable, a testament to love and prestige. Yet, amid the swirl of silk dresses and sharp tuxedos, 11-year-old Clara Hensley sat quietly, feeling like a shadow in her wheelchair. Clara adjusted the hem of her sapphire blue dress, a color her mother, Ellen, had once said brought out her eyes. She'd chosen it hoping her mother might glance her way, might smile like she used to before the car accident that changed everything. Ellen Hensley, once a vibrant gallery owner in Maris Cove's art scene, now sat at the main table, her face a mask of polite detachment as she nodded at old friends who no longer knew what to say. Clara's fingers traced the wheels of her chair, her gaze drifting to the dance floor where couples moved to a violin's tender melody. She used to love dancing, twirling in her mother's studio to old jazz records, both of them giggling until they collapsed on the floor. Now people barely looked at her. The other kids clustered together, whispering secrets, while adults averted their eyes as if her wheelchair might unravel their perfect evening. A server glided by with a tray of tiny lemon tarts. Clara reached out, her movement careful, but the server didn't slow, and she barely caught one before he vanished into the crowd. She sighed, setting the tart untouched on her lap. Across the room, Michael Reed tugged at the collar of his borrowed suit, feeling like an outsider among the elite. He was only here because his cousin, the florist, needed an extra pair of hands. His 9-year-old daughter, Zoe, had insisted on tagging along, enchanted by the promise of sparkling lights and endless desserts. Now Zoe tugged at his hand, her brow furrowed. "Dad, that girl over there looks lonely," she whispered, pointing toward Clara. Michael followed her gaze. The girl in the wheelchair sat at the edge of the room, her shoulders slightly slumped, her eyes fixed on the dancers. He recognized that expression. It was the same one Zoe had worn after her mother left, like the world had moved on without her. "Wait here, kiddo," he said, squeezing Zoe's hand. He wove through the crowd, unnoticed by the glittering guests, until he reached Clara. He knelt beside her wheelchair, meeting her at eye level. Her dark eyes widened, cautious, as if she expected a trick. "Want to dance?" he asked, his voice gentle but sure. Clara froze, her hands tightening on her dress. "I can't," she murmured, glancing down at her legs. Michael tilted his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Who says?" Before she could protest, he stood and stepped behind her chair, grasping the handles. A few guests nearby turned, their murmurs tinged with curiosity. Clara's breath hitched, but Michael guided her smoothly toward the dance floor, the music wrapping around them like a warm embrace. He moved in front of her again, holding out his hands. "Trust me, okay?" Clara hesitated, her fingers hovering uncertainly. Then slowly she reached for him. Michael's grip was steady as he supported her, helping her balance as they began to sway. It wasn't the wild spinning she remembered from dancing with her mother, but something softer, more deliberate. Her feet brushed the floor, her hands gripping his arms as if he were an anchor in a storm. For the first time in months, a smile broke across her face, bright and unguarded. The music, a slow waltz, seemed to carve out a space just for them. Guests nearby paused, their conversations fading into whispers. Clara didn't notice. She was too caught up in the moment, in the feeling of being seen. At the main table, Ellen Hensley watched, her chest tightening. Her friend, Laura, leaned close, her voice low with concern. "Ellen, should I intervene? He might not know how fragile she is." Ellen's hands gripped the edge of the table, her nails pressing into the wood. She watched her daughter's face, alight with a joy she hadn't seen since before the accident. "No," she said softly. "Let her have this." The music flowed, a gentle tide carrying Clara and Michael across the dance floor. Clara's fingers clung to his shoulders, her movements tentative but growing bolder with each step he guided. She could feel the strength in his hands, the quiet confidence of someone who carried more than just physical weight. "I haven't danced in forever," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the violins. Michael chuckled. "You're doing great. A natural." A laugh escaped Clara, light and free, startling her with its unfamiliarity. For a moment, she forgot the pitying glances, the awkward silences, the way the world seemed to tiptoe around her. She was just a girl dancing at a wedding, held up by someone who didn't look away. Across the room, Zoe watched, her eyes wide with pride. She'd seen her father step in like this before, helping a stranger, making things right in his quiet way. It was why she adored him. As the song ended, Michael eased Clara back into her chair, her cheeks flushed with a warmth she hadn't felt in ages. The crowd began to clap, not loudly, but enough to make Clara blink in surprise. She looked at Michael, who gave her a wink. "Told you could dance." Ellen approached, her steps hesitant, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she said to Michael, her voice thick. Then she knelt beside Clara, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "You looked beautiful out there." Clara's smile wavered, but it didn't fade. For the first time in a long time, she felt like her mother saw her. Not the wheelchair, not the accident, but her. And in that moment, something shifted, a small spark of healing that would grow in the days to come. Before Zoe could run to join her father on the dance floor, a hand gripped her arm. "Zoe, stay here," her mother's voice snapped, sharp as a blade. Vanessa Reed, once radiant in a way that turned heads, now stood with her lips pursed, her eyes cold as she pulled Zoe away from the crowd. Her perfectly tailored dress seemed to armor her against the warmth of the evening. "Your father's causing a scene, and we're not getting dragged into it." Zoe's shoulders sagged, but she didn't protest. She knew her mother's tone, arguing wouldn't change it. Meanwhile, the murmurs in the grand hall of Willowmere Manor grew louder, rippling through the guests like a breeze over water. "Who's that man?" "That's Ellen Hensley's daughter, isn't it? I heard she hasn't walked since the crash." "Is he out of his mind? She could get hurt." Michael ignored the whispers, his attention fixed on Clara. Her face glowed with every gentle turn, every swell of the violin's melody. He'd spent years as a firefighter, learning to carry people through flames, to shoulder burdens others couldn't. This felt no different. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught Ellen Hensley watching from her seat at the main table, her expression unreadable. If she had an issue, she could speak up herself. But Ellen stayed still, her gaze locked on her daughter. As the waltz faded, Michael eased Clara back into her wheelchair, her cheeks pink, her eyes brighter than they'd been all night. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. Michael knelt beside her, smiling. "Anytime, kid." He hesitated, then added, "You know, your mom could do this with you too." Clara's smile dimmed. She fidgeted with a fold in her dress, her voice small. "She doesn't anymore." Michael paused, unsure of Ellen's story, but familiar with the weight of feeling useless. He'd felt it himself after the station downsized, leaving him scrambling to provide for Zoe. Before he could respond, a voice sliced through the air. "Michael, a moment." Vanessa stood nearby, arms crossed, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. Michael sighed. "I'll be back," he told Clara, giving her shoulder a light pat before standing to face his ex-wife. Vanessa didn't wait for him to reach her. She closed the distance, her voice a low hiss. "What are you doing, Michael? Embarrassing us in front of everyone?" "I was dancing with a kid who needed it," he said evenly. "You don't even know them." Vanessa snapped. "That's Ellen Hensley's daughter. Do you have any idea who she is?" Michael glanced back at Clara, now alone again, her earlier spark fading. "I know she's been invisible to everyone here all night." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "This is why you'll never get anywhere, Michael. You don't think, you just do." "And that's why I can look myself in the mirror," he shot back. For a moment, Vanessa seemed ready to argue, but with a sharp huff, she grabbed Zoe's hand. "We're leaving." Zoe's face crumpled. "But Dad." "Now Zoe." Vanessa's tone left no room for debate. Michael watched them go, his jaw tight. He hated how Vanessa wielded Zoe like a pawn, hated the impossible choice between being the father Zoe needed and the man Vanessa expected. But then he saw Clara, still sitting alone, and pushed the frustration aside. One thing at a time. He was halfway back to her when a woman in a crisp navy suit blocked his path. Sylvia Grant, Ellen Hensley's assistant, offered a smile that felt more like a warning. "Mr. Reed? Ms. Hensley would like a word." Michael raised an eyebrow. "About what?" Sylvia's gaze flicked to Clara, then back. "About why you thought it was appropriate to touch her daughter without permission." Michael's gut twisted. This wasn't going to be easy. He followed Sylvia through the crowd, feeling the weight of curious stares. Guests whispered behind their wine glasses, their judgment palpable. Ellen Hensley sat near a towering window overlooking the moonlit gardens of Maris Cove, her wheelchair positioned with precision. Her face, lit by the soft glow, looked worn, like she hadn't rested in years. Sylvia stepped back with a curt "Ms. Hensley," before retreating just far enough to maintain plausible deniability. Michael didn't wait for an invitation. "If this is about Clara." "You touched my daughter without asking," Ellen said, her voice low but edged with steel. "She's 11. "I asked her first," Michael replied, meeting her gaze. And from where I stood, no one else was stepping up to make her feel like she belonged. Ellen's hands tightened on her wheelchair, her knuckles whitening. For a moment, Michael braced for an outburst. Then, abruptly, Ellen's shoulders sagged, and she looked past him toward Clara, who sat with her head bowed. "You think I don't know that?" Her voice broke. "You think I haven't tried?" The raw pain in her words hit Michael like a punch. This wasn't just anger, it was despair. Ellen rubbed her temple, her voice barely above a whisper. "A year ago, I promised her we'd dance at this wedding. I'd been working with a therapist, rebuilding strength. Then a week before, I collapsed. Couldn't even get up without help. Clara had to call for the paramedics." Michael stayed silent, the weight of her words settling over him. He knew that kind of guilt, the kind that gnawed at you when you felt you'd failed someone you loved. Ellen's voice trembled. "How am I supposed to lift her when I can't even lift myself?" The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken grief. Then a small voice broke it. "Mom!" Clara had wheeled herself over, her eyes wide and uncertain. Ellen's expression softened, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Clara's sapphire dress shimmered like a twilight sky as she looked up at her mother. Ellen Hensley forced a smile, but it was brittle, not reaching her tired eyes. "Hey, sweetheart, are you having fun?" she asked, her voice tight. Clara bit her lip, glancing at Michael, then back to her mother. "I was," she said softly. "Mom, can we dance like we used to?" Ellen's breath caught, her hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair. "Clara, you know I can't." Michael stepped forward before he could stop himself. "What if we helped?" Both Hensleys turned to him, Ellen's eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" Michael held her gaze, unflinching. "You support her upper body. I'll handle the lower. We go slow. It's her call." He shrugged, leaving the choice open. Clara's eyes widened, flicking between her mother and Michael. For a long moment, Ellen was still, her face unreadable. Then she exhaled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara, do you want to try?" Clara nodded eagerly, her auburn hair bouncing. Ellen swallowed, her throat tight, and maneuvered her wheelchair beside Clara's, locking the brakes with trembling hands. "Okay, let's do this." The transfer was clumsy at first, Ellen gripping Clara's arms, Michael carefully supporting her legs. They moved with the precision of a delicate operation, each motion deliberate. Then miraculously, Clara was upright, her weight shared between them, her feet grazing the polished oak floor of Willowmere Manor's grand hall. The string quartet, sensing the moment, eased into a gentle waltz. Ellen's arms shook, but she held firm. "Ready, love?" Clara beamed. "Ready." They began to move. It wasn't elegant or fluid, but as Ellen guided Clara through the steps, Michael adjusting to fill the gaps, something extraordinary unfolded. Clara laughed, a bright, unrestrained sound that rang through the hall, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Ellen's breath hitched, and then she laughed too, a raw, hesitant sound like she'd forgotten how. Guests stopped pretending not to watch. Phones appeared, capturing the moment. Someone dabbed at their eyes. Sylvia Grant, Ellen's assistant, stood rigid at the edge of the crowd, her nails biting into her palms. Near the exit, Vanessa lingered with Zoe, her expression sour. A pang of something like regret twisted in her chest, but she pushed it down. Michael, focused on Clara, said nothing, his throat tight as he kept their rhythm steady. Then a small voice broke through. "Dad, I want to dance too." Zoe darted from Vanessa's side, her pink dress fluttering as she raced onto the floor, her curls bouncing. Michael didn't miss a beat, shifting to keep one hand on Clara while scooping Zoe up with the other. The quartet leaned into a livelier tune, and the four of them moved together. Clara held between her mother and Michael, Zoe giggling as she clung to her father's shoulder, her tiny shoes tapping his toes. For the first time since the accident, the hall didn't feel like a shrine to Ellen's losses. It felt alive, pulsing with possibility. The guests watched, some smiling, others whispering in awe. What had started as a quiet act of kindness was now something more, a fragile, beautiful connection taking shape. Then the moment shattered. A woman's scream sliced through the music, sharp and jarring. Heads turned toward the entrance, where Sylvia stood, one hand over her mouth, a shattered wine glass at her feet, its contents pooling like ink on the floor. "Oh my God," she gasped. "Ellen, your medication." Ellen's body stiffened, her grip on Clara tightening. Michael felt the shift in her muscles. "What about it?" Ellen's voice was low, strained. Sylvia hurried forward, her heels clicking in a frantic rhythm. "Your evening dose. I checked your bag. The pills are gone." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ellen's face paled, her eyes wide. Michael steadied Clara, his voice calm but firm. What does that mean? It means, Ellen said through gritted teeth, without those, by morning I won't be able to move my arms enough to hold a cup. Her gaze snapped to Sylvia. When did you last see them? I packed them myself this afternoon, Sylvia said, her voice shaking with what seemed like genuine panic. This isn't just theft, Ellen. Someone knew what they were taking. Clara whimpered, her hands clutching her mother's sleeves. Michael saw the moment Ellen's fear turned to fierce protectiveness, her eyes blazing. Get security, she ordered Sylvia. Then to Michael, take Clara upstairs. Now. Michael didn't hesitate. He lifted Zoe onto his hip with one arm and guided Clara's wheelchair with the other, weaving through the buzzing crowd. As they reached the grand staircase, Clara twisted in her chair, her voice small. Mom's in trouble. Michael followed her gaze back to the hall, where Ellen sat, her jaw set, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Ellen Hensley sat alone in the grand hall of Cresthaven Estate, the guests inching away from her, their faces a mix of unease and pity. Only Sylvia Grant, her assistant, remained close, her hand resting on Ellen's shoulder with a grip that felt more proprietary than comforting. Something about the scene sent a chill down Michael Reed's spine. Zoe, sensing the shift in the air, pressed her face into her father's side. I'm scared, Dad, she whispered. Michael brushed a kiss against her forehead. Me too, kid, he admitted, the words catching him off guard. He hadn't let himself feel fear like this since his days as a firefighter, not through the divorce, not through the sleepless nights battling his own demons. But seeing Clara's trusting eyes, feeling Zoe's small hand in his, he was terrified of letting them down. Upstairs, in a guest suite repurposed as a safe room, Clara wheeled herself to the window overlooking the estate's sprawling lawns. They're searching the parking lot, she said, her voice tight. It's like someone just dumped the pills there. Michael set Zoe down with a sketch pad and crayons before joining Clara at the window. Below, security guards' flashlights sliced through the night, their movements too deliberate, too theatrical. His training kicked in, his mind analyzing the scene with sharp clarity. Clara, he said carefully, who handles your mom's medication? Sylvia, Clara replied without hesitation, then frowned. She's always super careful about it. A memory flickered, Sylvia's hand lingering near Ellen's glass earlier, her gaze during their dance sharp with something beyond concern. Michael's stomach twisted. He grabbed the hotel phone and dialed the front desk. I need the names of everyone who accessed Hensley's files this week. Now. The clerk hesitated. Sir, I can't. Life or death, Michael snapped, his tone leaving no room for argument. The clerk began typing furiously. Zoe tugged at Michael's sleeve. Daddy, the lady with the fancy earrings was crying in the hallway earlier. Michael froze. Which lady, sweetheart? The one with the sparkly shoes, Zoe said, mimicking wiping tears. She was on the phone saying, it has to be tonight. Clara's breath hitched. Sylvia wears those designer heels. The pieces snapped together with chilling precision. Sylvia hadn't just misplaced the pills, she'd orchestrated this crisis. But why? The answer came when the clerk read back the file access list. Alongside Ellen's medical records was another document, the contract for Hensley Gallery's upcoming acquisition, a deal that would collapse if Ellen were deemed unfit to lead. Michael's hands shook as he hung up. He'd seen this before, ambition cloaked in loyalty, a power grab disguised as care. But this time, it targeted a struggling woman and her daughter. Downstairs, a commotion broke out. Through the window, Michael saw Ellen slump in her wheelchair, her movements stiff and erratic, early signs of her condition worsening without her medication. Sylvia knelt beside her, her voice carrying just enough for the crowd to hear. Please give her space, she's having an episode. The perfect story, a frail CEO, a devoted assistant stepping in to save the day. Clara made a small, pained sound. We have to help her. Michael was already moving, grabbing Zoe's hand and guiding Clara's wheelchair toward the service elevator. Change of plans, he said. We're not hiding. We're fighting. Because if Sylvia wanted to wage war on this family, she'd chosen the wrong man to cross. The elevator doors closed on Zoe's quiet question. Are we the heroes now? Michael squeezed her hand. Yeah, kid. We are. The service elevator descended with a low hum, its dim lights casting stark shadows. Clara gripped the arms of her wheelchair, her face pale but determined. Zoe stood close to Michael, her small fingers clutching his like a lifeline. His mind raced. They needed evidence, something concrete to expose Sylvia before Ellen's condition deteriorated further. Then he remembered Clara's earlier words. Clara, he he said. Where does Sylvia keep your mom's pills at home? In her office safe, Clara answered. She never lets anyone near it. Her eyes widened. Wait, she always carries an emergency dose in her bag. Michael's jaw tightened. If Sylvia had an emergency dose, why hadn't she used it? The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open. They weren't just searching for pills now, they were hunting for the truth. The grand hall of Cresthaven Estate was nearly empty, save for a cluster of guests circling Ellen Hensley, their faces a mix of pity and suspicion. Only Sylvia Grant, her assistant, remained by her side, her hand resting on Ellen's shoulder with a proprietary grip. The scene made Michael Reed's skin crawl. Zoe, clinging to his side, whispered, "I'm scared, Dad." Michael pressed a kiss to her temple. "Me too, kid," he admitted, the words surprising him. He hadn't felt fear this raw since his firefighting days, not through the divorce or the long nights wrestling his own demons. But seeing Clara's trusting eyes, feeling Zoe's small hand in his, he was terrified of failing them. Upstairs in a guest suite turned safe room, Clara wheeled to the window overlooking the manicured lawns of Maris Cove. "They're still searching the parking lot," she said, her voice tight. "It's like someone just dropped the pills there." Michael set Zoe down with a sketch pad before joining Clara. Below, security guards' flashlights swept the grounds in a way that felt too choreographed. His instincts sharpened, honed by years of assessing danger. "Clara," he said, "who handles your mom's medication?" "Sylvia," Clara answered, then hesitated. "She's always super particular about it." A memory surfaced, Sylvia's hand lingering near Ellen's glass earlier, her gaze during their dance sharp with something more than concern. Michael's blood ran cold. He grabbed the suite's phone and dialed the front desk. "I need a list of everyone who accessed Hensley's files this week. Now." The clerk faltered. "Sir, that's confidential." "Life or death," Michael growled. The clerk scrambled to comply. Zoe tugged at his sleeve. "Dad," the lady with the sparkly shoes was crying in the hallway. She said, "It has to be tonight on the phone." Clara gasped. "Sylvia wears those fancy heels." The truth hit like a spark in dry grass. Sylvia hadn't just lost the pills, she'd engineered this crisis. The clerk's voice came through, confirming Michael's suspicions. Alongside Ellen's medical records, someone had accessed documents for Hensley Gallery's pending acquisition, a deal that would collapse if Ellen were deemed unfit. Michael hung up, his hands trembling. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated power grab. Downstairs, chaos erupted. Through the window, Michael saw Ellen slump in her wheelchair, her movements jerky, her hands struggling to grip the armrests, the first signs of her condition worsening without her medication. Sylvia hovered over her, scrolling through her phone, likely contacting board members to cement her takeover. Michael pushed Clara's wheelchair forward. "Get to your mom. Keep everyone distracted." Clara didn't hesitate. She rolled into the crowd, her voice clear and steady. "Mom, I found your spare pills in the car." Every head turned. Sylvia's polished facade faltered, her eyes narrowing. "That's impossible," she said too quickly. Clara held up an orange prescription bottle, grabbed from the hotel's lost and found. Michael realized with a surge of pride. "Right where you always keep them, Sylvia," Clara said pointedly. Sylvia's composure cracked, just for a moment, but it was enough. Michael slipped behind her, snatching her designer purse from the back of her chair. "What are you?" Sylvia began, but Michael upended the bag. Lipstick, a key card, and 2 orange prescription bottles tumbled onto the floor, identical to Clara's decoy. The room fell silent. Ellen lifted her head with effort, her voice weak but sharp. "You had them this whole time?" Sylvia's mouth opened, then closed. "Ellen, I can explain." "No need." Michael picked up one bottle, reading the label aloud. "Lorazepam. For muscle spasms. As needed." He fixed Sylvia with a stare that had once made rookie firefighters snap to attention. "Funny, these aren't the meds you said were stolen." Zoe, standing by Michael's side, piped up. "And she was crying in the hallway, saying it had to be tonight." The crowd's murmurs turned to gasps. Ellen's lawyer pushed through, phone recording. Sylvia took a step back, her heels catching on the polished floor. "You were going to let me fail," Ellen said, her voice heavy with betrayal. "In front of everyone. To prove I can't run my own gallery." Sylvia's mask shattered. "You're not the leader you were," she spat. "The board knows it." "I know it." Her gaze flicked to Clara. "Do you think she deserves a mother who can't even hold her?" Something in Michael snapped. In 3 strides, he was in front of Sylvia, gripping her arms firmly, his voice low and lethal. "You're going to leave. You're going to resign quietly. And if you ever come near this family again, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of snake you are." For a moment, the room held its breath. Then Sylvia tore free and fled, her heels clicking a desperate retreat across the oak floor. The crowd erupted in a mix of outrage and relief, voices overlapping in a chaotic hum. Michael turned to Ellen, who was reaching shakily for the real pills. Clara got there first, opening the bottle with practiced ease. "Here, Mom." Ellen's hands trembled as she took the medication, but her eyes, when they met Michael's, were steady. "I owe you." Michael shook his head. "You don't." As Zoe climbed onto Clara's lap, as Ellen's color began to return, Michael realized this wasn't about debts. It was about seeing someone's broken pieces and reaching out anyway. The quartet struck up a soft, hopeful melody, and Ellen held out a hand to her daughter. "Clara Hensley," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "May I have this dance?" Clara's face lit up, and with Michael steadying them both, mother and daughter moved together. Not perfectly, not easily, but together. The last rays of sunset bathed the hall in gold, a quiet promise of healing. This is why you don't walk past someone who's hurting. Sometimes one question, "Why is she alone?" can change everything.